Genau. Herzlich willkommen an der Stelle nochmal. Mein Name ist Daniel Fitz, ich bin Programmmanager für Klima und Umwelt im Global Compact Netzwerk Österreich. Und ich darf heute die zweite Einheit mitmoderieren von unserer Webinarreihe von Biodiversität. Sabrina, bitte möchtest du dich schnell vorstellen?
Ja, danke Daniel. Ja, hallo auch meinerseits. Ich bin Sabrina Peer vom WWF Österreich, Programmmanagerin für Nature und Business und genau, begleite Unternehmen dabei, sich unter anderem Science-Based Targets zu setzen für Klima, aber auch Biodiversität und Natur. Und ja, vielleicht können wir da gleich auf die nächste Slide. Damit ich kurz den WWF vorstelle, also WWF per se vielleicht nicht, aber die WWF-Unternehmensarbeit, eben wie ich gerade gesagt habe, wir begleiten Unternehmen und Finanzinstitute, um eben Klima- und Biodiversitätsschutz gesamtheitlich zu betrachten und in eine integrierte Strategie einfließen zu lassen und natürlich auch vor allem umzusetzen, Maßnahmen umzusetzen und wirklich effizienten und ambitionierten Klima- und Biodiversitätsschutz zu erreichen.
Dann darf ich an der Stelle noch den Global Compact kurz vorstellen. Der Global Compact ist eine Organisation, die derzeit weltweit über 23.000 Unternehmen unterstützt, die Sustainable Development Goals zu erreichen, anhand von prinzipienbasierten Wirtschaften für eine nachhaltige Zukunft zu arbeiten. Und die 10 Prinzipien des Global Compacts sind hoffentlich einigen von Ihnen auch bekannt. Aktuell sind wir in 64 lokalen Netzwerken tätig, aber unsere Tätigkeit ist global. Unsere Themen sind global und das Thema Biodiversität beschäftigt uns heute ganz besonders. Das wär's noch, du, Sabrina, gleich. Meine Kollegin Sabrina ist gerade leider nicht mehr in dem Meeting. Oder die Verbindung ist schlecht. Okay, dann überspringe ich beziehungsweise erkläre Ihnen ganz kurz noch diese Slide. Die Wiederholung vom Webinar 1. Was haben Sie verpasst? Was haben Sie bereits gehört? Wir haben uns mit den Grundlagen von Biodiversität beschäftigt. Wir haben definiert, was Verlust von Biodiversität für Unternehmen bedeutet, welche Risiken dadurch bestehen. Wir haben Ihnen vorgestellt, wie diese Biodiversitätskrise zu analysieren ist, welche Ziele und welche Methodologie da ist und wie man ein Ziel setzt. Wir haben kurzen Überriss gemacht, welche Methodologien geläufig sind und an der Stelle auch die Qualitätssicherung, wie ein Ziel qualitätsgesichert werden kann, um entsprechend gute Erfolge für Biodiversität in Unternehmen erzielen zu können. Heute werden wir uns allerdings tiefer oder vertiefend mit der SBTN, mit der Science-Based Targets for Nature beschäftigen und die Methodologie selber von den Kolleginnen von der Science-Based Targets for Nature hören. Ich werde in Kürze auch dann auf Englisch wechseln. Ja, da ist Sabrina wieder zurück. Heute, kein Problem, schön. Freut uns, dass du wieder zurück bist. Ich darf an der Stelle Paul Owale Johnson vorstellen. Paul Owale Johnson is Corporate Engagement Manager at the Science-Based Targets Network. He leads the global efforts to support companies in setting science-based targets for nature. Paul manages engagement with 290 companies across 40 plus countries, including Fortune 500 firms, to advance nature positive action aligned with global frameworks such as the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Paul has worked with the United Nations in Canada, France, Denmark, and Ethiopia, where he leads implementation and stakeholder engagement for the Global Environment Facility and Green Climate Fund portfolios, supporting clean energy, climate action, and nature-based solutions in over 80 countries. It brings deep expertise in multi-stakeholder collaboration, nature, climate policy, and sustainable development to this webinar. So thank you, Paul, for joining us today. And I'm going to hand it over to you right now.
Thank you so much, Daniel. We are really happy to be here because I'm not by myself. I also have my colleague and boss, actually, Charlie Henderson, who is our market development director, who recently started last week, actually, joining this webinar. And you'll be hearing from Charlie in a couple of minutes. I also have our communications officer at SBTN, Abby Litchfield, joining us all the way from Canada. She will be talking about a new initiative we recently rolled out called the Step Up for Nature campaign. And without further ado, I will hand over to Charlie to start talking about SBTN. And
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Paul, for allowing me to hijack your presentation. I really appreciate that. I've, as he said, just joined SBTN, and I'm delighted, that, so far with what I've seen. I've come from a background in consultancy, and I worked most recently at ERM. I was a partner there leading sustainability and climate practice in the UK, and then more recently, the nature and water team. So, I bring a certain amount of experience working direct with corporates. And what I'm really excited about joining, taking this role is the growth in interest in nature, and also obviously the rigor and the best practice that sits behind SBTN. So I'm going to just say a few words just to set the scene, and then I'm going to pass over to Paul, and he's going to give a sort of substantive deep dive into the process of setting targets. But what I'd like, what we'd really like you to take away from this presentation is, as well as understanding the ins and outs of the targets, also to really understand the practicalities of stepping up. And we're here to answer your questions, as well as this presentation, I should say. We've learned a lot through undertaking pilots over the last couple of years, and there's been some evolution and adaptation of the target setting process. Paul's going to go into that in more detail, and we've got a version 2 in the pipeline as well, which is going to make the process a lot more streamlined for businesses that step up. So what we're going to start with is a poll. What we'd really love to hear from you. This is a simple process. You've probably done it before. You either click on the QR code or you go to the website Slido and type in that number. And what we'd love to hear from you is the top 3 motivators for your company to engage with the nature agenda. So, for example, is it about risk reduction? Is it about seizing innovative opportunities to build business value? Or is it about delivering resilience in your supply chains? So I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a think about that and to answer the question. And hopefully, if our tech serves us right, Abby will be able to share the results. Here we go. You can see they're changing fast in front of our eyes. Got risk reduction and supply chain resilience kind of neck and neck, but also importantly, interestingly, reputation and brand are very important in nature target setting too. I think what's interesting here is there's a whole range of reasons that of similar weighting, if you like. So there's lots of very good reasons to set targets for nature, all of which are important and all of which are very relevant. Interested to see that investors and regulator expectations aren't registering unless there's a bit, there we are. It's a bit of the screen that wasn't showing. Well, we can step away from that. Maybe we'll have a look a bit later to see where it's landed. And I'd really like to encourage you to put questions in the chat here for the Zoom, so we can start to prepare ourselves for the Q&A that comes a bit later. Excellent. Okay, well, let's move on. So I'm just going to give you a bit of background and a backdrop to, SBTs for nature. And just a personal reflection, I've been in sustainability for about 30 years, working very closely with corporates. And I've seen that the focus on there's an increasing focus on a broad range of topics and risks that's really come to the fore in the last handful of years. And I think one manifestation of that is CSRD, which recognizes that nature, circularity, and society and other topics, pollution, they sit alongside climate, which has traditionally been recognized as one of the most material topics for business. And I think this reflects for me the growing recognition that companies are increasingly tracking nature impacts and dependencies, and they're coming under growing pressure, driven in turn by internal departments like procurement, risk, legal departments, investor relations, to really get a handle on nature and impacts and dependencies. And the other big development is that action without proper credibility does not hold. We've seen a lot of instances of greenwashing, and businesses coming under fire for that. So science-based targets for nature, we exist to help solve that problem for business. We're providing the first global standard for companies to set nature-based targets that are scientifically robust. And we translate the global biodiversity framework and goals into clear, actionable targets that companies can implement. And we've designed over many years and trial and error and testing a rule book and a playbook that's been developed by with scientific underpinnings, of course, by the world's leading environmental organizations. So we like to think that we're really at the forefront of addressing this challenge. And let's move on to the next slide. So we're built around 5 steps. From assessing impacts, prioritizing impacts, to setting and tracking targets. And we cover four key nature realms: freshwater, land, ocean, and biodiversity. And of course, climate is one of the major drivers of nature degradation too. But that's tackled through our sister organization, SBTI, through, you'll be familiar with their target setting process. And currently our steps 1 through 3 are available, and with strong guidance, and we've kind of established a rigorous process that businesses can follow. And steps 4 and 5, so the steps 1 through 3 are about evaluate assessment, target setting, and prioritization. And steps 4 and 5, acting and tracking, act and track, they're coming later this year. But I think the message here is there's no time to waste. Your company can already get started today. And the SBTN process takes you through a full materiality assessment and results in location-specific, impact-based, and scientifically rigorous target setting. And that means you can be assured that you know exactly where and how much action is needed, and also you can then judge how much investment is required to address those impacts and dependencies. And that's through your operations and then also up your supply chains. Okay, if we can move on. And I'll just give you briefly a sort of a better sense of where we are on the kind of the journey to scale target setting, nature target setting. We've conducted pilots, and we've had over 50 businesses apply to participate in those pilots, but we've concentrated on getting a smaller subset of those 50 through the pilot system, pilot process. And you can see there are some very big names of those businesses who engaged with the pilots, across a whole range of different sectors, consumer goods, pharma, extractives, and water, and forest products. So just to name a couple. So there's a range of businesses, and I think the key message here is that SBTN target setting can apply to a whole range of different sectors, whichever sector your business might be in. We've also got many hundreds of businesses, and Paul will go into this in a bit more detail, in our corporate engagement program across 40 countries. We have 6 regional initiatives, and three in 2026. And in brief, the corporate demand for setting these targets is robust, and it's evolving very, very fast. We're on a kind of an exponential curve, if you like. And engaging with us helps move internal conversations from vague, kind of slightly unstructured, if you like, conversations to concrete conversations around sourcing, locations and suppliers and target setting there. And ultimately, we want to get many thousands of businesses through the process, such as that are validated through SBTI. And we're delighted to be partnering with UNGC, and Paul might explain a little bit more about our kind of history working with you. But working with partners is absolutely critical to our mission, and so we're delighted to be supporting you on this accelerator program. So I'll just end, and then I'm going to hand over to Paul. But I'm just going to summarize the business case for nature action. In particular, what we give is focus. For many companies, nature risk is still, it's invisible, or it's it's difficult to come to grasp and to get to terms with. But there is a recognition that it's material, and going through our process will help understand what that materiality is, and rank and decide whether action needs to be taken. And this includes water scarcity, land degradation, and ecosystem collapse. So we can help surface where the risks are, and then moving on, decide where investment is best spent, allowing decisions to be made about where in the supply chains and operations action needs to be taken, and which will deliver the best business value. And action is something that we're really focused on. As I mentioned, we have this 5-step process, and action is very much a part of it. So this goes beyond the academic, the strategic, the analytical, to actually delivering change on the ground, guiding where to invest, guiding and then tracking where that change is happening. That's what matters most for us. And SBTN is the recommended approach that sits alongside TNFD, Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosures. And we are referenced as the target setting kind of de facto standard. And this is also ties in, of course, to CSRD and other disclosure standards. So this means that by using SBTN, you can answer the questions of investors and regulators and other stakeholders who you're disclosing to. And this all dovetails together, and we've got a number of working groups with with other standard setting bodies like TNFD. So in summary, by signing up to targets, you're going to ensure business continuity, resilience of your business, resilience of your supply chains. You're going to meet regulatory expectations and disclosure needs. And also, as a fantastic outcome, you will also be stimulating innovation, change, and transformation on the ground. So that was a quick whistle-stop tour of why businesses are signing up, and thanks for allowing me some time to introduce myself and present. And I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Paul, who's going to explain more about the process and deep dive. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Charlie. So Charlie has spoken about the value prop of SBTN and why companies are taking that action to step up for nature for various reasons that is good for the business, but also the planet. Now I'm going to talk about what it takes to actually set science-based targets for nature. And it's usually around these three key topics. One is time, one is the technical expertise needed, and the other is financial resources. We've seen historically that companies that have some experience with target setting or a bit more advanced in the nature journey, because of, for example, going through CSRD or SBTI or TNFD, as Charlie mentioned, they tend to find SBTN a bit easier. This is not to dissuade companies who are a bit more early in the nature journey, but this is because these companies already have, for example, good data or the internal technical capacity to navigate disclosures such as SBTN. We also recommend that aside from having a strong internal team, companies also enlist the help of external technical consultants who have experience navigating SBTN, just because this helps save a lot of time and they don't have to walk around in the dark or make mistakes and have to retrace the steps. They can be guided along the journey through tailored support. In terms of the time required, give or take, step 1 and 2 takes about 1 to 6 months, with step 3 taking up to 3 months. In total, that would amount to about 1 year of 1 year in certain targets, if you also include the validation time. Now moving on to next steps, to the next slide, sorry. This might sound like a very long process. This is a year we are talking about, but there are some easy entryways into SBTN. Typically, SBTN starts with impact and dependency screening because we know that not all impacts matter equally. So using tools like our Materialitéts screening tool or On-Call, which many of you might be familiar with, companies can quickly identify hotspots across the value chains and take action. The key message we want to learn today is you do not need to start with everything. And I'll talk about this in subsequent slides. For many companies, starting could look like starting with one environmental realm, for example, freshwater or land, or a business unit, or even just setting one target in one basin. And why this is very important is because it helps internal teams learn the process on the go by starting small, build confidence in the process, demonstrate value to the leadership to secure buy-in, and also strengthen data in areas of their businesses that might not have such strong data. Before I move on to the next slide, I would also like to emphasize the importance of validation. Validating is very important because a lot of times setting targets is just one side of the coin. Validating is the other side of that coin because validating enables companies make public claims to show their progress on SBTN. It also strengthens sustainability reporting and helps them build confidence and clarity that they're on the right track, even as they move on to subsequent steps. Now to the accelerated pathways, which I spoke about earlier, or in other words, how a company can start small. Accelerated pathways exist to make SBTN usable for companies with real constraints, and these constraints could range from anywhere from data gaps to differing level of readiness across the organization. But how this works in practice is that after an initial assessment of your organizational boundary, which is done in step 1A, right from step 1B, companies can narrow their scope to 1, a business unit, 2, an environmental realm, or a value chain segment. And this is especially valuable for high impact commodity producers who tend to focus on direct operations because that's where majority of their impact occurs. Or maybe a company operating across different regions with subsidiaries and business units and product lines spread quite wide across the globe. This approach helps them focus on where there is interest from leadership, where they have the data, and where there is readiness and interest, and gives them the freedom to sequence their progress in a manner that works for their business model. Now let's deep dive into the accelerated pathway by looking at the business unit first in the next slide. The business unit approach is a strategic tool, especially for the large multinationals. It lets them start from where they have the most influence or the best data. Maybe, for example, let's take the example of a company operating across Europe. And this is a retail company. They have multiple products, hundreds of products, and they want to focus on just one product line in France and focus on that one product line right from step 1B to prioritizing and then setting targets for that one product line. They are able to set freshwater and land targets. Now, this is a real life example, which you'll see more of those in the next slide. But that's how the business unit approach works. A company can decide to focus on a subsidiary in a larger conglomerate or a legal entity in the business, or a product line, or a geographic or brand segmented product within the business without having to take on the work of focusing on all aspects of the business at once. Now let's look at those examples I mentioned in the next slide. In these three examples, you see a a scenario where a company focused on a product line, another scenario where a company focused on a brand or country or and country combined, and also a scenario where a company focused on a legal entity or subsidiary within their businesses. All these three examples are real life examples and cases where these companies have gone on to set targets using this business unit approach. Now, moving on to the second part of the accelerated pathway in the next slide. Another way companies can start in a manner that works for their business is by focusing on one realm. The truth is, they don't have to focus on all realms at the same time. They can choose to focus on the realm that is most material to their activities. And this allows them make progress where the data is strongest, while they continue to build information in other areas. For example, a company with high water use doesn't need to estimate land or ocean pressures right away. They can focus on just fresh water and even further drill down into just key basins they operate in, setting targets for those basins, and expand over time to other basins where they operate in. By focusing, they only need to measure the pressures relevant to that specific realm. For example, water use for fresh water. Plus, just one caveat though, if they are not ready to focus on one realm at step 1B, companies also still have the flexibility to decide to focus at step 3 when it's time to set targets. Moving on to the next realm, which is the value chain segment. Companies also have the option to narrow their focus to a specific part of the value chain, either direct operations or upstream activities. And this is especially useful if your impact is heavily concentrated in a part of your value chain, maybe upstream or direct operations. And this is really good, but there is a caveat that before a company moves forward with this, just to ensure they are focused on what really matters, they will need to check the eligibility criteria in our technical guidance to ensure that the pathway fits that specific business unit's business model and realm. And if it does, right from step 1B, similar to the other pathways, they can narrow the focus to just that value chain segment. But remember, once you select a segment, that becomes the foundation of all future targets and public reporting. It has to go within that segment. And before I continue, I'll pass over to my colleague, Abby Litchfield, to talk about another initiative that supports the accelerated pathway and also invite you to sign up for this initiative. Over to you, Abby.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Paul. So yes, I'm Abby Litchfield, the Communications Officer with SBTN. If you want to go ahead to the next slide, that would be great. So with accelerated pathways paving the way for faster action, we've also introduced this initiative called Step Up for Nature, which builds on that momentum by enabling companies to publicly signal ambition for their next step towards science-based targets for nature. So this year, as we head toward the 2026 Global Biodiversity Stocktake, this initiative will help demonstrate how companies are contributing toward measurable outcomes for nature. So in terms of how this actually works, if you can go to the next slide, please. The initiative calls on companies to take their next step towards science-based targets for nature wherever they are in their journey. So to participate, companies publicly signal which milestone in the SBTN process they plan to submit to the Accountability Accelerator, which is our independent validation host, and on what timeline they're aiming to submit that milestone. The milestones available mirror those that are part of the target setting process, but specifically those that have validation services available. So that could be step 1 and 2, or for companies further along on their journey already, step 3 for freshwater and land. Soon, ocean will also be an available milestone for step 3, but currently ocean validation services are being piloted by a group of companies, so that will become available once the pilots complete mid-year this year. And as I mentioned, this initiative focuses on the validatable milestones, so 1 to 3, but companies participating will also be encouraged to continue their journey forward towards steps 4 and 5, act and tract, to really put their targets into action. If you can go to the next slide, please. So companies that participate in this initiative are then featured on SBTN's Ambition Board, which contributes to a transparent picture of collective ambition and progress. So on the screen, you can see a few of the companies that have already stepped up. In December of last year, we announced the first cohort of companies participating, which included 24 companies from 12 different countries and a broad range of sectors. I can paste the link in the chat afterwards. You can explore the companies stepping up. And this initiative remains open for additional companies to join in. We anticipate releasing the next cohort within the next few months, later this spring. And to help build momentum for the initiative, our validation host, the Accountability Accelerator, is also offering the first companies to submit a validation that are participating in the initiative a 50% cost reduction on their validation service fees, which is a really great opportunity for those getting started. And if you go to the next slide, in terms of how you can sign up and participate in this initiative, I'll paste the link in the chat as well, but there's a QR code on the screen, which will take you to our landing page where you can learn more about Step Up for Nature and how you can get involved. For companies that may not be ready to publicly signal their ambition for their next step just yet, there's also different ways you can stay connected and learn more without taking that leap so far. But we really encourage those who are ready to start on their SBTN journey to participate and share publicly your exciting ambition. And with that, I think I'll pass things back to Paul, but definitely happy to answer any questions about Step Up for Nature in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. It's very quickly because I see we're close to the end of our presentation. In 2025, we focused on making SBTN more usable through updated steps 1 and 2. I'm now on the next slide. Yes, thank you. And we also released our first ocean method, specifically for the seafood sector. And in 2026, we are taking this a step further by releasing Land V2, which adds degradation and land cover to the existing methods. We'll also be releasing the freshwater V2, which also introduces groundwater and chemical pollution. Currently, we are running two cohorts of pilot companies testing these new methods and ahead of the official release. And by March, we'll also be releasing or starting a freshwater pilot also. And we invite companies to indicate interest to be part of this pilot. Finally, for step 4, we'll be releasing that this year. It will come in form of a guidance, not a method. And why this is an important delineation is that being a guidance, we will be providing guardrails and recommendations on how companies can meet their targets, what kind of actions they can take. But this will not be prescriptive. We will leave the innovation to you, the businesses. And also, we will not be validating this step 4, which is act. More information to come on that in later this year. In addition to our core method documents, we also have capacity building resources you can explore on our website. So we have interactive modules of our corporate manual, which is a good read if you're just starting your journey on SBTN. We also have self-paced training videos you can watch at your own leisure to learn more about the SBTN target setting process, along with other resources you can find on our page. Now to our final page slide. I want to end this presentation by saying that we are here to support you at every step of the way. If you need a consultant to work with, we have a web page on our website that lists service providers you can contact who have passed the SBTN trainer modules to support you on your SBTN journey. If you also have questions about validation, how to get started, what resources or tools or data you would need to get started, please reach out to us. you can contact us via our corporate engagement email, which my colleague will put it in the chat. And if you have technical questions because you've gotten started already with SBTN related to validation, whatever it may be, we have a help desk that operates every day from Monday to Friday to answer these questions you may have. So, bottom line is we are here to support you. And we are also very supportive of this initiative by the UNGC Austria team of bringing SBTN to you. We thank you for your time and hope to stay connected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Charlie, and of course, thank you, Abby, all of the SBTN team for this very interesting presentation right now. So I've seen many colleagues have already posted their questions in the chat. Now is the time where you also, if you want, we not too many people in this webinar. So if you want, you can raise your hand and even ask the question directly to the experts right now. Or, of course, write them in the chat. Let's see, do we have outstanding questions? So there's one question from Sontor. Okay. Okay. Every question is being answered very quickly from the SBTN team directly in the chat. Do we have more questions? Please don't be shy and answer the questions directly as well. Would be advantageous for the conversation currently. So if I may read it out loud, how do SBTN and the new ISO 17298 relate? How do they relate currently? Can anyone answer this
Paul,
question?
is that one you can take?
I would actually recommend we come back to you on this once we discuss with our technical team. We can speak about SBTN, but the ISO 17298 is something we are still exploring internally and would have a position on that. So what I can do in concrete steps is come back to Daniel with an answer post this session.
Thank you, that would be great. Next question from David Berger. Will there be specific guidance on sector-specific target setting frameworks for pharmaceutical companies?
So currently we are building sector-specific toolkits, but I would say that these toolkits are just a combination of different resources to support specific sectors. Currently, we are finalizing a textile toolkit with more toolkits to come in future. As opposed to SBT, I already have sector-specific frameworks. We are not there yet. We still have this framework that encompasses all sectors that can use SBTN. But these toolkits will be a much helpful resource to help specific sectors access resources that pertains to them specifically. So more to come on that.
Okay, great. I've seen also in the chat many questions regarding the sector specific assistance, so that's very high in demand, it seems. I can ask you a question that I had prior to this meeting. So when setting a science-based target, what level of spatial data granularity is specifically required, and where does the methodology allows for some proxies or assumptions? So
that's an interesting question, which we actually covered in our last presentation with UNGC UK. So and Abby can add more information about this in the chats, but SBTN allows the use of local data, but also modeled and global data, where the local data is not available. In terms of the level of granularity, when looking at your upstream impacts, we require that companies are able to do that up to a subnational level. Because we do understand the challenges in securing local data way upstream, particularly for businesses with very complex supply chains. So we've set it at a subnational level to help businesses make this possible.
Okay, I think that should help many companies in this approach. Another question that I prepared was also within the science-based targets for nature approach, how are direct, indirect, and upstream biodiversity impacts distinguished along the value chain?
Sorry, can you come again with the question?
How are direct, indirect, and upstream biodiversity impacts distinguished along the value chain?
Okay, just give me a moment, please, to answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, I can give a sort of high level answer to that one, albeit I'm new to SBTN. We don't have a direct target for biodiversity per se, but through taking actions on water and land, oceans, etc., biodiversity is almost like a cross-cutting theme that runs through everything we do. But what we don't do is we don't set an expectation around measurement and management of biodiversity, be it by species or, interspecies, whatever. That's beyond the scope of the expectation. Don't know if you wanted to add to that, Abby or Paul.
Sure. Charlie, yeah, spot on. Sorry, I blanked for a second. Yes, while we technically focus on three realms, which is freshwater, land, and oceans, we do incorporate biodiversity into all these three realms. Early on into SBTN, there were some discussions about if we should have biodiversity as a standalone realm, but biodiversity in reality is cross-cutting of all three of these realms already, and that's why it's important for us to intertwine it. So even as companies focus on one realm, freshwater or land, they're also taking into consideration biodiversity impact within that realm also. And to support this, we'll be releasing a biodiversity paper later this year in collaboration with WWF and UNEP, which further expounds on how SBTN addresses biodiversity.
Yeah, I'll paste it as well in the chat. There's like a brief summary currently available on our website on this topic, but yeah, the paper that Paul just mentioned will actually be coming out within the next month. So definitely encourage you to sign up for our mailing list as well. That'll be the easiest way to find out when it is released, and it'll go into a lot more detail.
Great. Any other questions that we have? Okay, one more question. On which level do you set targets? Can we get an example, please? So more case studies, of course.
Yeah, I can start by sharing a couple links as well. You can see examples of the companies that have currently publicly disclosed their science-based targets for nature on our target tracker, which I just put into the chat. So these are the technical claims language that they've used after going through the process. And to learn more about that process as well, we have case studies available on a range of those companies to explore as well. But Paula, I know you were going to say something too, so feel free to jump in.
No, I was just going to ask Astrid to maybe come off mute and explain what she means by, like, on what level. Do you mean what's part of your business or what's part of the value chain?
Hello. What I mean is, I'm in consulting actually at the moment, and I experienced that a lot of companies are, I don't know how to say it, are a bit shy to look at the topic, the ecology topic itself. I'm mostly in consulting with the ESRS. So ESRS E4 is something which the companies are very shy. And beforehand, I'm not sure, but I understand that you do not look at a species level or how you can improve specific ecosystems. And so I was wondering, what are the targets? Or I would like to have an example, like I figured I have 5 hotspots in downstream value chain, for example. Where I know I have really an impact on the surrounding ecosystems, for example, and if this is the case, so probably when you do not look at the species level or at the ecosystem itself, or on which level do you go in? Do you say I wanna enhance 3/3 of the area in general, or what is the level you're looking at then?
So if I understand you, it's how granular do we get,
Yes.
or what do we focus on?
Yes.
So I think in this case, I could just give some examples. Caring is, for example, a company who sets both land and freshwater targets. In the case of land, first of all, just to say that we don't focus on downstream, we focus on direct operations and upstream, because I see you mentioned downstream. In such cases, the kind of targets companies could set would be things like, for land, they could set a no conversion of high impact commodities. For example, leather in the operations. They could also use regenerative agriculture in meeting some of their targets. We also look at things like landscape engagement targets and land footprint reduction targets under the land methods. And we leave it up to companies to decide on how they want to meet these targets through things like, as I mentioned, regenerative agriculture. Same with freshwater, we consider things like toxic pollutants. We look at water use, water reduction. So those are some examples of the kind of things we focus in. And in a way, as we mentioned, these things also intersect with biodiversity. And by taking these actions or setting these targets, we're also addressing some of the examples you gave. I don't know if this is helpful, or maybe I misunderstood the question.
Thank you. I can imagine the level your targets focus on. Thank you. And yes, I meant upstream. It's a bit confusing with the German for me always, and I'm mixing the words. I'm sorry for that. I meant upstream. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you for your question, Ms. Leben. Yeah,
Yeah,
Sabrina.
actually, I got a question. So Paul, or Charlie, or anyone else, Abby, when I understand it correctly, the accelerated pathways allow it to select business units for target setting, right? So does this mean that, for example, if I am a retailer, or I don't know, like another company which sources, for example, coffee or cocoa, that I can, but also other commodities, and there's a huge, a huge part of the company is something differently. Can this business or this retailer select the supply chain of cocoa or also coffee as one business unit, and then say, okay, I'm just going to set a target for coffee, a science-based target for coffee, for my coffee supply chain, which would be maybe a land target in one region, like for example, for Colombia. My coffee in Colombia has this land science-based target. Did I understand it correctly with the accelerated pathways? Is it like this?
Yes, it works in a similar fashion. But one thing important to note is that that segment of your business already needs to exist. You can't create a business unit just for the sake of SBTN. So let's say in your business, you have a coffee line. Maybe you produce coffee, and then you try to source for coffee, cocoa, and the rest. Now that's a valid reason to use the business unit approach, because that's a product line that already exists in your business. And you can make the justification when you validate that this is a product line, we are focusing on just this product line and all commodities related to this product line in this country. Yes, you can actually focus on one country, and therefore we are taking the business unit approach. We've actually had an example in France, where one of the biggest retailers in France used this approach for their dairy products. And you can find this in our case study section, where they spoke about their experience taking this approach.
Okay, thanks.
I think maybe one thing I'd add quickly on there as well is that it is sequential. So you can start the accelerated pathways after doing that initial high-level materiality screening, and then it's one by one. First, you can select your business unit, then a realm, and then depending on your activities, you may be able to focus on direct operations or upstream. And all of the details to find out which companies are able to narrow in which ways are available in our version 1.2 guidance for steps 1 and 2, which is kind of the most recently released update outlining the details for accelerated pathways. And that's available on the accelerated pathways page.
Thanks.
We have a question with regards to your claim. So with a request for a better punchline. What do you think? Is there is there an inspiration to be taken?
I mean, I
Maybe
think that's pretty good. Yeah, and there's similar ways to build on that. I think from a messaging standpoint, we're really hearing that risk is resonating right now. So we're really emphasizing, address hidden risks in your supply chain, uncover them through science-based targets for nature. But yeah, I think at the highest level, just understanding that we all rely on nature in every single element of our economy and our daily lives never hurts. So I like what you have, Carol.
Thank you. I was hoping for more though, but I understand what you mean. Thanks.
Okay, great. Do we have 1 or 2 more questions before Sabrina and I will finish up this webinar today? Thank you, by the way, SBTN, for putting so many links in the chat. I have to get them out and send them to all the participants afterwards, so you make sure that you get all the information. So there's plenty of case studies already out there, luckily, to share.
Yeah, and we can share the slides as well, which have more information. And just back on your point, Carol, I think some of the business case language that Charlie walked through at the beginning of the presentation, which is in the slides as well, could also be helpful for your question.
Oh, you've just reminded me, Abby, where did we land on our poll? What's the kind of final? Don't know if you've still got it open.
Yeah,
You
sure.
might be able to
Share quick.
let's have a very quick look. I'd be interested. There we go. Okay, so as you say, Abby, it is risk. Seems to be the top reason, followed closely by supply chain, reputation, value creation. Just kind of encouraging that all of these topics are front of mind for businesses when they're setting these targets. So thanks everyone for participating in that poll. Super interesting.
Great. So then thank you very much, Charlie, Abby, Paul. Really, really insightful presentation. I see a lot of clapping hands right now. Very much appreciated that you joined us for today. And I hope many of you participating today took something valuable out of it. I certainly did. Thank you for joining. And I will continue the presentation in German together with my colleague from WWF. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Daniel, for inviting us and team.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
So, wir schließen die Webinarreihe in Kürze. Ich denke, Sie können meinen Bildschirm jetzt wieder sehen. Genau. Wir schließen die Webinarreihe für heute. Wollen nur ganz kurz einen Ausblick geben, was ihr erwartet. Wir haben eine dreiteilige Webinarreihe angekündigt gehabt. Wir werden diese in 2 Wochen schließen, am 29. Jänner, und werden hier auf die strategischen Ziele noch ein bisschen tiefer eingehen. Sabrina, möchtest du ein, 2 Worte dazu verlieren auch?
Es wird unter anderem um noch auch Metriken gehen und vor allem auch versuchen, werden wir dann noch Praxisbeispiele zu präsentieren. Genau, sofern es gibt aus dem österreichischen Bereich auch, gibt es natürlich auch schon ein bisschen was und schauen, dass wir dann noch ein bisschen mehr eben vor allem auf Metriken eingehen. Und ja.
Super. Dankeschön. Einen letzten Hinweis noch in eigener Sache aus einer anderen weiteren bestehenden Kooperation zwischen dem Global Compact und dem WWF an der Stelle. Dienstag, den 27. werden wir eine Publikation vorstellen, wo WWF Österreich und Global Compact Network Austria zusammen österreichische Nachhaltigkeitsberichte aus dem Jahr 25 gescreent haben, insbesondere auf die Klimatransitionspläne, auf die Granularität derer sowie Biodiversitätsmaßnahmen. Sehr interessante Insights und wir haben auch glücklicherweise 2 spannende Inputs, einmal von der Lenzing und einmal von der Unica, welche uns ihre Pläne und die Motive ihrer Pläne nochmal näher führen. Links sind hier in der Präsentation, die Sie dann im Anschluss noch bekommen, sowie dann auf unserer Webseite globalcompact.at. Ich danke.
Genau, und die
bitte.
hat es gerade im Chat auch geschickt,
Super.
den Anmeldelink. Also
Genau.
direkt im Chat auch zu finden.
Dankeschön. Vielen Dank, dass Sie heute dabei waren. Dankeschön von mir, vom Global Compact Network Austria. Sabrina.
Danke auch von mir fürs dabei sein und wir freuen uns auf das nächste Webinar und hoffen, dass da auch wieder viele mit dabei sein und mithören und mitzuschauen.
Vielen Dank.
Vielen Dank
Schönen Abend.
und einen schönen Nachmittag.
Schön, Sabrina.
Schönen Nachmittag. Danke fürs dabei sein. Goodbye.